Hello and welcome to this episode of the Ramble Australia podcast. Thanks to Arrow Sport. It's me, Jacob, currently hosting. Lockie is away. I think he's doing hockey stuff. I don't know. He hasn't said. He said he's away. He never told me actually what for. But it means that I'm back in the host seat and I'm joined today by Poletti. Poletti, it's been a fantastic weekend of football. There's been some tremendous games, some crazy results. And plenty to speak about, so it could be a bumper episode, but we'll try our best to make sure that you guys aren't sitting around for 3 hours listening to us ramble on.
No, we're going to make this an espresso edition. We're not going on no 3-hour rambles tonight, unlike other podcasts that used to record on Sunday night. SDNT. I miss you every day. I just want you back. But no, we're here. We'll keep it. We'll try to keep it to a tight hour as best as we can. No, Lockie is away on hockey stuff. He is in Canberra, and as soon as he told me the dates, I immediately went, right, there's a Canberra United game you can go to, and he's like, I don't know if I've got time for that.
He pulls the excuses out straight away.
Yeah, straight away, like not even 2 minutes after he told me.
It's like he was waiting for you to ask the question.
Yeah, basically. No, look, it's all good. Some of us have a life outside of football, not the two of us. We don't have lives outside of football, so...
right. We're here every week,
big weekend of action.
That's right. It was. I'm going to kick things off. I think you could call me biased for it, but I think it was the best match of the round and arguably the biggest fixture of the round, and what I think a lot of people now are starting to realise is easily one of the biggest games in the country every season, which is the original rivalry at Hindmarsh Stadium. And Poletti disagrees, and I know there's some Sydney siders that feel the same way.
It's my East Coast bias, what can I say?
It is that East Coast bias, but I think, what's last night for us on Saturday night for everyone else listening to this was just an absolute spectacle. I think it's gotten a lot of people to kind of realise that, hold on, there's something special in this fixture, and I think it really showcased Poletti the best of Australian football on Saturday night.
100% from start to finish. Like, this is everything you want a game of football to be. Perfectly sized stadium, a raucous crowd, fantastic goals, controversy, like you name it. Anything you could want to put into a football match, it happened on Saturday night. At Hindmarsh Stadium. I mean, honestly, like anyone who says, the A-League can never compete with Europe, like, as I'm getting, like, honestly, I'm as sick as anyone of trying to pander to the Euro snobs, but show them last night's game.
Yeah.
And you know what? It said if you're not turned on by that, probably the poor choice of phrase there. It said if you're not excited by that, then you deserve your 0-0 Wolves versus Leeds Boarfest at 2 a.m. on a Sunday morning. Like, if you're not excited by what happened in Adelaide on Saturday night, then you deserve Wolves versus Leeds 0-0 absolute Boarfest at 2 a.m. on a Sunday morning, because we're not getting you after that.
No, and I think the other thing that works, and it's the conversation we're always having, right, about good crowds in appropriate stadiums, and Adelaide have kind of been in the forefront of that, I suppose. I guess in the entire existence of the league have found a sweet spot, but we also saw it as well in the Perth fixture. They got, was it about 12,000, I think, out to their game as well, which was a tremendous turnout, and we'll get onto that game.
I'm pretty sure it's one of the first times they've got over like 5 figures in quite some time, so absolutely massive work there.
But you could see just from those two games how much it can do to the product on screen, but also when you're there in the ground. Matt was saying at the Perth game, he was bouncing. He didn't know what to do with himself because he hasn't seen that in such a long time. And then at Hindmarsh on Saturday night, you can kind of hear my voice is a little bit croaky, and I do say every year that's the one home game a season where I'm there on my own money. I pay for my ticket. I'm there as a supporter, not as the media, and kind of has left me a little bit worse for wear for today's podcast. But just in general, I think it was a tremendous a celebration of football. But it wasn't without controversy, which you touched on, Poletti. And I think this has kind of been the overarching story for a lot of fixtures this weekend is again, it comes down to refereeing. And not necessarily that the decisions were wrong, but it just feels like there's been a lack of major consistency over the last couple of seasons with regards to a lot of these calls. Now, kind of last weekend, it was about handball and what constitutes a handball, what doesn't. This weekend, in this game, We get 2 VAR calls for offside. The first, Ryan Kitto's goal in the second half was disallowed. Craig Goodwin, just by a matter of centimetres, was offside in the build up to that one. And then Victory's goal in the 87th minute looked to have sealed the game 2-1 for them. Matt Grimaldi, a really, really strong finish from the edge of the area. No keeper in the world is saving it. The issue was Jelassic was in an offside position and was deemed by the referee, Poletti, to have been blocking the view of goalkeeper Joshua Smits. Now, there's been a lot of conversation about this in terms of, was he blocking the vision? Was he not? Does it matter? Would he have saved it anyway? But I want to come to the conversation that we were kind of having before we hit record on this episode of, there's space for nuance in decision making in football for referees, and we see that with the handball rule. And we're always talking about how it's difficult because you don't know what's going to be given, because a referee might interpret it one way that another referee would interpret differently. Whereas with offside, it's very black and white, right? If they are in the line of sight of the goalkeeper, they're deemed to be obstructing the view of the goalkeeper, therefore they are offside. And yet, even with a black and white rule, football fans aren't happy. It just seems like there's no way to make these rules work. And okay, partisanship comes into it for a bit, and obviously Victory fans are going to be annoyed, but it's not just been Victory fans that have been annoyed by this call. I've seen it from Sydney FC, from Wanderers fans, from all sorts, who have said that it's a very harsh decision to have made. And it does make me wonder, maybe we're just all too fussy as football fans, right? Like we have these rules where, it's a grey area, so you can kind of understand it. And this discussion around orange cards, one that could be a red, one that could be a yellow. And then when it's black and white with offside, we're still complaining. I don't know, maybe we're just impossible to please.
I mean, I think you've just summed it up there. Football fans are impossible to please, and they're always going to find something to complain about, because people love to complain about anything and everything. And to be honest, it's probably an excuse to, people see it as an excuse to bag on the referees. It seems it's everyone's favourite pastime is to bag on the refs, and then you wonder why your kids on the 12 match on a weekend can't get a referee.
Yeah,
maybe there's something to that. I don't know. We're not going to get into that today. Look, I think your comparison there to the handball law is an apt one, where there's inconsistencies, there's nuance to it. How far did it travel? Was the arm in a natural position? Was it not? Did player X do this? Did player Y do that? Which impacted the ball hitting the hand. If it hits the attacking hand, so if it hits the hand of an attacker and the goal is scored, then it gets wiped off. But if it hits the arm of a defender and the goal is scored, then it stays. There's so many different little, bits and pieces to it. And quite often, you hear fans, media pundits, everyone going, well, we just want consistency. We just want to know what a handball is and what it isn't. And then, you get this call that it's clear, it's black and white, there's absolutely no arguing it, and all everyone wants to do is argue it and go, oh, well, it was, Smits was never saving it, or, oh, it ruined, a massive moment in the game, and, it did this and it did that, and it's like, oh, so suddenly now you want nuance, now you want inconsistencies, now you want, things, the moment of the game to be taken into account. Honestly, make your mind up, people. Do you want consistency or do you not want it? Because if you can't get it here, when are you going to get it? When are you going to actually be happy with this? Or are we just constantly looking for an excuse to continue to bag out the referees? The referees make enough mistakes without us finding ones that they're not making to continuously create a problem with this. I've got no issue with the call. You can argue all you want, but it cost Melbourne City a grand final a few years ago. It cost Adelaide United an original rivalry game as well, that Ryan Kidder was very quick to point out on the broadcast. I wonder if he's just had that sitting in the back of his mind.
He's been waiting for an excuse to bring it up.
Harvey Lopez, he's been, it's like that little piece of random trivia that you're going to need at pub trivia one night. You're just you're just waiting for an excuse to use it. Yeah. And Kiddo found it, or if someone told him about it, it's just like, oh, you remember this? And it's just like, oh yeah, actually, I'm getting pulled up for interview. Maybe mention this.
This is the thing with this specific decision, though. I think is that offsides ruling out a goal 99 times out of 100, the team that has the goal overall is going to go, yeah, they were offside, that's fair enough. But because this is such an obscure one and it doesn't happen frequently, but it's still black and white. That's why it can feel so egregious, right? Because the player isn't directly touching the ball, right? They don't have to. That's the whole point. Is it's an interference just by being in an offside position. And people have been quick to point out that in that Javi Lopez example, I think was it Stefan Walk was the player on the goal line between the goalkeeper's legs. Like you can kind of argue there's more interference there.
And what I will say is that standing in an offside position in and of itself is not an offence by the laws of the game. It's once you become directly involved in the play that it becomes an issue. And whether that's, as we said, line of sight, whether it's you're on the goal line because you've slipped, which Stefan Moore kind of did. He slipped as he was going in, tried to pull himself up, couldn't. But there was no way the victory keeper was going to get to that particular ball. But because Stefan Moore interfered in the play, and it's the same thing here, right? Yeah. Smits is not saving that because it was pinpoint, hit the exact spot of the post it needed to hit. He's not getting to it, but he was still interfered with. So, swings and roundabouts.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's, you can understand, like I said, you can understand for Victory fans, that's an extremely annoying call to have to be on the receiving end of. But what it did is create what's going to go down, I think, in Adelaide United folklore as one of the craziest endings to a game of all time. 30 seconds left, and Ryan Kitto with a header that, for all money from the stands, looked like it was going over the bar. It looked like that on the broadcast as well. I've gone back and watched the highlights, and it just looked like it was floating over, and it just sucked down underneath the bar. Wachowski was just static. I'm guessing he thought it was going over as well, and it just sailed over him into the far corner of the net, and absolute pandemonium at Highmarsh Stadium. It really, Poletti, it's taken away a big moment from the victory, but it like you said, swings and roundabouts. It's created a massive moment for Adelaide United and a massive moment for their season. They've been in a rough patch of form, not playing the best football, but a last-minute winner at home against the rivals. It's now put them on 19 points, 7th place. The teams ahead of them, most of them have played a game extra, so there's space now to actually try and jump up the standings a little bit for Adelaide and take some positivity from this. The Olyroos players will be coming back into the equation now as well, which we'll touch on a little bit later. But yeah, it feels like this could be a huge turning point in Adelaide's season, this kind of result.
100%, absolutely, 100%. It's when it comes to derbies and rivalry games, it's throw the form book out the window, and you'd have had Melbourne Victory for all money leaving with 3 points, and some would argue, as we've discussed incorrectly,
they should have been,
that they should have. But it is what it is. Adelaide, come up trumps, and they probably deserve to on the balance of play as well. That being said, I also wouldn't have been too upset if it was a draw. Adelaide did have a couple of chances ruled out for offside as well. So it's one of those games where, as I said, you just, if you're a neutral, you're absolutely loving it to the very last second, regardless of regardless of the referee decisions about it. If you're an Adelaide fan, you're loving it even more, and if you're a Melbourne Victory fan, I've seen social media, a lot of people not happy with it. And before we move on from this game, the last thing I'm going to say, Melbourne Victory fans, if you're not happy with the refereeing decision, might I remind you of the heist in the Hunter?
Well, there's 3 things I want to finish on from this, just some quick shout outs. Number one, Matt Grimaldi. I thought he was spectacular for the victory when he came on. Really showed his worth. Obviously had the goal overruled, got what was the equaliser as well at the time. He had a tremendous game for them and really showed his class. So I'll be excited to see more of him for the victory continuing on this season. 2, to the travelling support. The Victory fans turned out, sold out both away bays. It was awesome. They contributed massively to the atmosphere. It's always great when they come down in numbers, and I've already seen some go, right, okay, now we've got to sell out the final original rivalry game of the season as well to show them what it's really like. So I feel like it's just great to see these kind of organic things in the league where the fans really buy into it. And it's for Adelaide, at least, Melbourne is the closest away trip for Melbourne. Adelaide is obviously a pretty convenient one, and there's that rivalry there. So it's these kind of things that make football so brilliant, and was really great. And a final shout out as well to whoever it was a couple of rows behind me at the game who happened to recognise me. I think it was about the 70th minute, and the ball goes out of play, and we're just sitting there, and I just hear from behind me, "Are you with Roundball?" And I turn around, give a nod, and then get confused for Christian, which I'm not sure how that happened, but no, it was great, and a few other people around us as well piped up that they liked and enjoyed the podcast. So a massive thank you to all of you who support our podcast and what we do. It's always awesome to bump into you guys in real life as well. So if you do see us, come up, say hi. We're not all like clocky and really awkward and taken aback by it. But if you confuse me for Christian, then maybe I will be. But no, it's always awesome to see that. I'm going to move on now. Poletti, to a game we previously mentioned, which kind of had a similar vibe to it, which was Perth and Brisbane. And this was a game that we kind of headed into it, had built up as what could be a fun battle between these two new coaches, right? With these great personalities. And obviously the news came out that Michael Valkanis had to head back home to Greece for a family emergency, which is a bit of a shame because we obviously didn't get that matchup in the press conference, which we wanted to see. But obviously family comes first, and we hope everything's okay with him and his family. And wish him back into the league as soon as he can be, because he'll be greatly missed in those press conferences. But even without him, Brisbane got the job done, Poletti, and it wasn't the easiest of wins that they've had this season. Perth did take them all the way, and it was a good goal by Sam Klein in the second half to give Brisbane all 3 points. But Perth started out strong. Taggart got that early goal. It just didn't prove quite enough in front of a really strong home crowd for the Glory to take all 3 points.
Yeah, unfortunately, for those fans that turned up, they don't get to see Glory walk away with 3 points. But I hope that they saw enough in that game that they genuinely want to come back. Like, I saw enough in that game where I'd go, oh, okay, it's an unlucky result. Things happen in football. We saw enough that'll make us want to come back, right? Like, and to be fair, I think there's also going to be an added incentive for a lot of these Glory fans to want to come back by virtue of the way the game played out. And Perth Glory took the lead quite early on. Adam Taggart, his record equaling goal, equaling Andy Keogh's 59 goals for Perth Glory in the A-League era. And I have to specify A-League era because Bobby Tetspatowski scored like 2 million in the NSL.
And they're one of the few A-League clubs that was around during the NSL era as well. So you've got to specify that it is in the A-League men era. 59 goals, club equaling record for Adam Taggart. So next game you're going to want to turn out because it could very well turn into a where were you when Adam Taggart became the club's all-time leading goal scorer in the A-League era. That's something you're going to want to be there for if you're a genuine Perth Glory fan. Maybe you've fallen off in the last few years, and to be fair, I wouldn't blame anyone for having wanted to fall off in the last few years because they've had some dire football out west. But, Adam Griffiths has got the good times rolling again. And so, I genuinely think there's a built-in incentive for, most of that crowd, if not all of it, plus, a few extras to come on and come back to their next game whenever it is. I don't have it in front of me right now. But on the Brisbane side of things, they've had a couple of poor results and they're able to turn it around here without their coach. They played some quality football. I just wish they'd ease back on the scuffling, like 10% less on the scuffling. Like it's almost like it's like it's starting to become the middle square on the bingo card of what's going to happen in an A-League men's round each week as Brisbane Raw get into scuffle. Yeah. And look, in a tight game like this, that's the kind of stuff that you can anticipate happening a little bit for sure. But yeah, you're right. It's becoming a bit of a habit for the Raw. As I've said throughout the season, I've got absolutely no qualms with the way that they're playing football. I think that they've been an extremely good side this season. But it is those little things that they just kind of keep pushing the line a little bit, and it's could start to kind of snowball out of control. But no, they've been tremendous this season. The other positive, of course, for the Glory fans is that they played relatively well against a team that many are considering to be one of the top 3, top 4 teams in the league this season, at least the way that they've played so far this season in Brisbane Raw. So, you're coming up against a strong side. Okay, maybe form's not been on their side, but it's the Raw, right? It's going to be difficult to kind of break them down a little bit. That they're going to be looking to hit you where it hurts. And the fact that, Perth were, for all intents and purposes, able to kind of push as much as they could against that was tremendous to see and should be a big booming positive for their fan base. But yeah, for Brisbane, like you said, that snaps a really bad run of form now. And we mentioned just before about Adelaide United and how, that kind of a result can be a big springboard for the season. I think Brisbane really needed this one. Their football in recent weeks hasn't been their best. They concede 3 to Wellington. They lose a really scrappy match against City. Lose at home to Auckland. It just feels like things were starting to kind of slip away from them. But then to go out west, of course, it's an away trip for them. Not the easiest place to travel against a Perth team that's on the rebound. To get that result, without your head coach, that's got to be a massive confidence booster.
100% it does. 100% it does. And, we've seen, just how tight things are in the A-League. Anyone can beat anyone on any given day. And, in seasons like this, it's absolutely not a cliche, right? It's been a while since we've had a team go invincible. I think the closest in recent memory is probably that Sydney FC 16-17 side.
Just like one loss they had or something.
It was one loss to the Wanderers in a derby, but that they were basically unbeatable all season. You look at a lot of it and you see just how tight and how close the A-League is. I think it's 8th through to first is separated by 6 points, and second through 8th is separated by 6 points. Separated by 4 points. It's just so tight. One win, for most of these teams will literally jump them 3 spots up the table. It's absolutely insane just the way things are playing out at the moment, and it's one of the reasons we love this league.
Yeah, 100%. 100% is we're going to jump now to Sydney FC and Wellington Phoenix Poletti, and this one again refereeing kind of. It wasn't at the forefront because I think we can all agree that Reece Ewley being sent off was objectively the correct decision. That was a horrific challenge by him. He's coming in studs up, gets nowhere near the ball, catches the back leg above the ankle. All day, every day, it's a red card. But it brings up
and Alfie Talley said as much on the broadcast when he was asked about it post-game. He said, it's a red card every day of the week for mine, no issues with it. And basically said, look, Reece Ewley's young, he's learning. There was absolutely no need for him to go in for that challenge. He'll learn from this and, he'll be a better player for it.
But it does bring up an interesting comparison to something that happened. Was it just literally last week?
It was last week, second or third minute. Paul Oakon-Engsler goes in for a challenge on Anthony Caceres. For me, having watched them both side by side, these were virtually identical.
Very similar.
These were virtually identical. Maybe you could argue Ewley's had a touch more force in it, and came from a slightly further distance away, but they were both studs up. They were both above the ankle. There's, for me, how, and this is where I will give credence to the we want consistency debate. I know I just absolutely crapped all over it 10, 15 minutes ago, but how can Ewley's be a red card today, but Ocon Juniors couldn't have been a red card last week? I absolutely don't. I don't understand that. For me, if it's a card, it's a card. I don't care if it's the first minute, the 90th minute. I don't care if it's a second yellow coming after a first yellow. If it's a card, it's a card. Give it the same way every single time. And, especially when we have VAR, right? There's no reason that these things shouldn't be being picked up on a regular basis. And, like I said, I just don't understand how, for 2 basically identical challenges, how one was a red and one wasn't.
Yeah, and you can see the impact that making that correct call can have on a game as well, right? Because Wellington, they opened the scoring relatively early. Armiento with a heavily deflected free kick off the wall, it goes in. He actually had tested the Sydney goal much earlier as well with a strike from range. But, despite that, Sydney was still in the game. They were creating good chances. Was it Quintal, I think, had one that was knocked away by the goalkeeper. That just were, Sydney felt like they were in that game, and all of a sudden that red card happens. You're down to 10 players and, backs up against the wall a little bit, and it felt like from there Sydney really couldn't create any comprehensive chances, and Phoenix were clinical. Isaac Hughes gets a goal in the 63rd minute. Alex Rufer it was a weird one to watch because the ball comes in from the set piece and falls to Rufer, who just kind of stands there, and no Sydney player goes up to meet him and try and take the ball off. Nobody drops really deep to try and cover any of those runners, and Rufer just able to chip it up for Isaac Hughes. But it was a really clinical display, Poletti, from the Phoenix, and it's good to see that from them, right? Because, last season it felt like they didn't really take the game by the scruff of the neck when they had it. Whereas this season now, we've seen a few of these kind of results where, one in a case where they had a red card and they were down to 10 players, but now here where they're able to capitalise against 10 players, they're in a strong position already, being 1-0 up, go and get that second goal and just being able to cruise along. That's huge for them, right? That, for Italiano, who's been under a little bit of fire early on in this season, they're finding form, they're playing good football, and, they're getting the results that their performances deserve, that their performances warrant, but also that they should be getting in those kinds of situations.
Absolutely, 100% can't disagree with most of what you said there. So maybe like a 95% agree. I will say, like, Wellington were under pressure late for the last 15 minutes of this game. Sydney were peppering as best as they can. Like, there was I'm pretty sure there was a 15-minute period where the ball just didn't leave the Wellington Phoenix defensive half.
But then that's the benefit of being 2-0 up, right?
I know, exactly. They were able
you can afford to concede one.
They were able to absorb that pressure as Sydney FC were chasing, to halve the deficit. But yeah, honestly, like this was a great performance from start to finish by the Wellington Phoenix. As you said, it's been coming for a long time. I'm someone who hasn't necessarily been the biggest fan of Chiefy this season. I'll put my hand up and admit I've been very impressed with the way he's been able to bounce back and finally get the team clicking. It's a little bit of a disappointment. It's taken till almost the halfway mark of the season for them to start to implement his game plan. And to be fair, there is every chance it's going to take one bad loss, where the high line just gets completely exposed again, and the same questions are being asked again. What lessons have been learned? Why is this happening again? They've got we saw Bill Tuiloma make his debut off the bench today. They've got we'll touch on it in transfer later. They've got another couple of players coming in, I think. So it's things are looking up for the Wellington Phoenix. They jump into 8th place, which is good, and they join that pack that's right in and around that top 6 battle, where one win or one loss can completely change where you sit on the table. I'm happy for Chiefy. I'm happy for the Phoenix. They've been playing a lot better than what some of their results have warranted this season as well. But I'm so happy for the Yellow Fever. This weekend was their tour of duty. Yeah. They were in Canberra yesterday. They were in Sydney today. 2 wins, 6 points, absolute domination of both of their opposition. Both of whom had players sent off around the same time as well. Both 2-0 wins. So it's kismet, right? It was supposed to happen this weekend for them, and I know correlation doesn't necessarily equal causation, but I think the Yellow Fever might have to go on tour every weekend when the two teams are playing away in Australia.
There might be some sort of credit to that line of thinking, Poletti, but from a Sydney FC perspective, this would be an immensely disappointing result. Back home at Sydney Football Stadium again, a decent-ish crowd. You said it, just over 13,600-ish, which for a Sydney FC, it's down a bit on the biggest crowds they've had and those glory years. But considering how things have been, that's a pretty solid outcome for them. But to lose 2-0 to the Phoenix, it's a team that they would have been eyeing up as perhaps a good mix, right? A good matchup, sorry. The high line, that chance to get in behind, being those playing, having guys like Marcel Tisserand playing those long balls in behind, which we've seen be super effective this season, and just none of it was working for them. This is a blow for them. This is a big blow. I mean, they'll take a lot of pleasure in the fact that Auckland were unable to get the job done against City earlier, which we'll touch on in a bit. But that's a big blow for them, because this was an opportunity for them to really start to open up at the top of the table, and they failed to do so.
Yeah, there's just these little inconsistencies that are coming around from Sydney FC at the moment. You can argue that they should have gone down to 10 last week, and I certainly just argued that they should have been down to 10 last week, but they travel away from home. They didn't have to leave Sydney, but it's still away to Macarthur. Tough conditions, with the heat and everything like that. They walk away with 3 goals, 3 points. They put on an absolute clinical performance. Headed down to Melbourne the week before, held on for a 0-0 draw. An absolutely fantastic defensive performance by Harrison Devonish-Mears. Mm-hmm. Stopped Melbourne City basically single-handedly, and single-facedly as well. Did everything they've needed to do. They've been putting in some good performances, and then this week it was all undone and there's just, like I said, there's just these little inconsistencies that are popping up in their game that they need to sort through. They need to work it out, because otherwise these are the sorts of things that come finals time, and which is exactly where Sydney would expect to be. You know, they were disappointed not to do so last year. Sorry, excuse me. Disappointed not to do so last year. You know, that'll have them falling apart in finals. That will get exposed by better teams. That will get exposed by teams who aren't necessarily having an off day. You know, I'd definitely argue MacArthur had an off day last week. If MacArthur can play to their absolute best, that they probably pick apart a Sydney FC side, like the one that turned out today. Instead, you know, the result played out the way it did. You know, so just these little things, the little 1%ers, right? That just need to be done every single week.
For sure, yeah. And yeah, that's a good point you bring up about kind of minimising the losses you have on an off day. If you have an off day, at least try and get a draw, you know. But what Sydney weren't able to manage it, nor were their title rivals Auckland either. I said before. They went down 2-1 to Melbourne City on Friday night. Poletti, again, super disappointing from an Auckland side that has looked very clinical again this season. Lockie Brook was on the score sheet again, and he's having a tremendous season and has been a real revelation for them. Obviously, he showed his class for the Wanderers as well when he was last in the A-League, but I don't think quite to the level that he has done so far for Auckland, where he has been a real difference maker for this team, and it was a cute little finish from him. But City just able to weather that storm, and 2 late-ish goals. Obviously, the penalty for Max Caputo, he finishes it, and after discussion last week of, well, you didn't send him to the Olyroos, so why isn't he playing? He gets on the pitch and he scores a goal, so it's great to see there. And a rather non-controversial handball call as well. De Vries looked very sheepish after it wasn't given. He was kind of looking around and the cameras kind of captured him looking a bit guilty, and ultimately VAR came to the right call there. And then Medin Mehmeti, the youngster, kind of thrown into the fire a little bit at times during his career with Melbourne City, with the injury crisis they've had. He comes up with the goods. It was Aziz Behich, I think it was, who set it up for him, who had a tremendous game. And City now, they're back in the mix. They're up into 5th place. But for Auckland, the main thing is, right, Sydney also failed to get a result. They stay 2 points clear at the top of the table. Okay, Sydney have a game in hand, but they're 3 points clear of the Jets, who have also played 13 games. So, all things considered, not the desired result for Auckland, but come the end of the weekend and all of the results, at least you didn't lose any space to your main title rival. Yeah,
that's exactly, probably the worst case scenario, right? You lose your game, but then you lose the space. And, very similar thing happened to the A-League women this weekend. Melbourne City had a chance to, further their case at the top of the table. They go down to the Jets, then Canberra had a shot, and then they go down to the Phoenix, and then the Victory had a shot, and they went down to Adelaide. Like, it's just, like, does anyone want first place in this league? And it's a similar thing in the men this weekend. So, it's just a weird weekend for teams at the top of the table. No one seems to want to, start to put a stranglehold on that first place position, despite, the riches that we know await for everyone that isn't, Auckland or the Wellington Phoenix, with Asian competition, on the line. It's, look, Melbourne City, there's certainly, I don't think they played the better of the two sides in this game. I thought Auckland probably did enough to win. I think once City got that goal back from the spot, it just seemed like they were able to step up. Just to gear that, and literally it was literally like that last 10-15 minutes that were the difference in this game. If Auckland had been a little bit more clinical earlier, maybe put away an extra maybe put an extra goal on the board, we're looking at a completely different result. But as it was, they weren't able to, and maybe, a draw might have been the right result in this game. That opening half hour was certainly one that's not going to live on in the record books. Neither side had a shot on target from open play. No. It's just, it was not the easiest of watches. That's the sort of game that, that first half you dread, where you're trying to convince your mate to watch football, and it's just like... That's
the game you get, yeah.
It's just like, come on, it could be fun, it could be exciting.
I promise it gets
better.
Good. I promise
it gets better. Yeah, exactly. And they watch this and they go, yeah, this is exactly what I expected. And it's just like, no, I promise you it's going to get better. And if they'd have stuck around to the second half, they'd have been rewarded. Yeah. But, it's one of those things. It is what it is. Sometimes you just have those games of football where, it takes a while for things to get into it, and Melbourne City were able to come out on the right end of it.
I think this raises, again, the discussion that's been had about Auckland all season long in terms of goal scoring, right? It's kind of been their problem. They just can't seem to, capitalise in these kinds of fixtures, put the ball in the back of the net. They've not been the worst team, in the competition by far. I think they're sitting fourth in terms of goals scored, which is, generally pretty good. But for a team that has aspirations of being right at the top of the table, to be losing these kind of games by, one goal. They've lost now to City. They've lost twice to the Jets, of course. It's just frustrating for them, and they don't have that consistent output up front. They brought Sam Cosgrove in, hoping he'd be that kind of an influence on the team. Really hasn't had that. Jesse Randall has been just kind of okay. Logan Rogerson, I think he's got on a score sheet a couple of times. I think Lockie Brook is their top goal scorer this season. It just feels like there's a lack of certainty going forwards for this side, and maybe part of that comes down to the build up, right? Having the likes of a Hiroki Sakai out and not having him bombing up the wing and freeing up space for others. But it's still a concern that they're going to need to kind of look at moving forwards and just try and figure out what is going to be the difference maker for us if we're not doing a Sydney where we've only conceded 9 goals through 12 games, so we don't have to score as many. That's fine, but when you're conceding a goal a game, you're going to need at least 2, right, to get yourself over the line. So not having that goal scoring threat is a big problem for them. And fortunately the January transfer window is open, but it feels like that's the key thing for Auckland. If they can address that, if they can get a good goal scorer in, there's no reason they can't just continue to build at the top of the table and finish the league on top. But as it stands now, they're open to these kinds of games where if they just can't get the ball in the back of the net, then there's no hope for them.
Well, I'd argue they don't need to address the goal scoring, and what else? And I'll explain myself actually.
Yeah.
They need to tighten up the defense. If they can, so let's look at some of these games, right? So they conceded 3 to the Jets, they conceded 2 to the Jets, and that's sort of been where most of their goals have leaked. Like, they didn't concede to the Western Sydney Wanderers twice. They didn't concede to Melbourne Victory once. And then in other games it's been 1-1s, 2-1s. They had that massive victory over they had that massive victory over Wellington, but that's sort of been it. There hasn't been too much otherwise. As you said, it's been a goal a game, but there's just been these little patches where they've shipped multiple goals to the Jets that have sort of undone them, to be honest. Like, they haven't had a 2-2 draw this season, and I'm not necessarily saying you can't discount those Newcastle games. You can't discount the Melbourne City game where they conceded multiple goals, because you absolutely have to include them. But one of them was one of those Newcastle games took place in absolutely torrential conditions, and then the other one, Newcastle were by far the better side. So, like, even though they were down to 10, like, Newcastle were just by far the better side. So I can't necessarily say that it's their scoring that's an issue. I'd say it's their defense, and only at certain points. Like, if they were to have a fully fit defense, a fully fit attack, fully fit midfield, and we know injuries happen, so maybe they might need to address 1 or 2 concerns because of injuries. But otherwise, I'd say they're probably the best side in the league. And the only thing that's hurt them is just these 1 or 2, over the course of a season, probably isolated games.
Yeah, quite possibly. I think the concern is, though, and I'll draw a comparison to the NFL here, of this idea of these shootouts, right? Particularly when it comes to playoffs in the NFL and finals in the A-League, where are you able to either limit the, possibility of you conceding that much that it becomes a shootout, or on the other hand, being able to match that, in attack and being able to keep up with the opposition. And for me, it just feels like Auckland doesn't quite have either of those. We've not seen, like you said, we've not seen them get a 2-2 draw. They've not even allowed themselves to get into those shootout kind of games. But also their defence, when it isn't on, here City were exploiting their fullbacks all game long. It looked really easy for them. Same thing can be said about the Jets and the 2 games that they've lost to them this season. When the defence isn't there, they're too open, and they are conceding kind of those groups of goals that kill the game completely. So it feels like while over the course of a home and away season, they're fine, they're isolated incidents, things will balance out over the course of 26 games. When it comes finals time, that's when you can't afford for that kind of thing to happen. And for Auckland, I think that's where the concern lies, is that they are open to conceding a few goals and then not necessarily being able to match that during a game, and that's where in finals that can end your season after one game. So that's going to be their concern, I think.
I think that's a fair point. I've got one counter to that, and I've got one piece of banter to add to that. So the counter I'll add to that is defense wins championships, and then the piece of banter I got is, hey Josh Allen, how you doing? I'm saying defense wins championships. If the defense turns up in Denver today, I'm just saying, Buffalo's off to the AFC title game next week.
Counterpoint, Poletti. The Steelers-Texans game was 7-6 for 3 quarters. So,
exactly. Defense wins championships.
Well, yeah, the Steelers still lost.
Defense wins championships. Defense turns up, and, the offense just has to get lucky.
It's not the be-all and end-all, and I think we saw the opposite of that in another game this weekend, which was the Baby Jets and the Wanderers, and the Jets have been just electric this season, scoring crazy goals.
How good is Eli Adams? Oh my gosh.
That hit.
He is unbelievable.
Has there been a better goal this season than that?
Probably the last one Eli Adams scored from free kick range.
Yeah. Maybe one of those Battle Lassie ones in his hat-trick. I remember being quite audacious as well, but it just was such a sweet hit. Everybody rooted. Goalkeeper didn't even move. The wall was static. It was just such a sweet hit. Obviously, they went off with I think it was a bit of hamstring tightness or something a few minutes after that, which is a little bit of a shame, and hopefully there's a speedy recovery because he's a big out for the Jets. But Poletti, the Jets just keep on rolling, and that was a very kind of quintessential Jets win, where it's that young player in Eli Adams standing up to just hit the ball hard and score a goal. And the Wanderers mounted, or tried to mount, a bit of a comeback, and it was Lual who in the 80-something minute got his goal, and he looked good when he was on the pitch too. He created a few chances, had some shots, but it wasn't enough, and the Jets were able to, just through pure luck, but also just taking a shot sometimes. We hear fans of teams get frustrated. Just take a shot.
Shoot.
And the Jets did it. And Eli Adams stepped up from that free kick, a little layoff, and absolutely blasted into the top corner, and they come away with the 3 points. And that's massive for their season. I think they sit in 3rd place now, ahead of the Raw. This is, I feel like over most of the season we've been talking about the problems the Jets have had. So for them to be sitting 3rd, that is absolutely enormous.
100% it was. And I understand this is going to go onto our YouTube. That was Farken. It was not the other one. Just want to clarify that to anyone who may be looking for a quick demonetization button. No, look, it was a very good game by the Jets. I think Eli Adams, as I said, what a player, what a hit! He struck a fabulous one against MacArthur a few weeks ago in what was a loss. He's done it here again. There's one a little bit more of a training ground set piece routine where it was, as you said, left off for him, and then he's rocketed it in anyway. And that's why I think everyone got caught off guard, is because they just weren't expecting the little bit of a layoff there, and by the time they had a chance to react to it, the ball's already sailed past everyone. It was just absolute genius there from Newcastle, and credit there has to go to the coaching staff for coming up with that sort of routine. And right, this is how we want to pull it off. But then also just the players to execute it. Like, the coaches can tell you to try this and do this, but it's still on the players at the end of the day to execute. And we've certainly seen many a player in the past who will just take it themselves and, maybe not execute that free kick routine that the coaches have drilled into them all week. So it's those sorts of things where, everyone's got to be, singing from the same hymn sheet, and they absolutely were in this game. The Jets sneakily into 3rd place, 4 wins out of their last 5. It seems, good. Like literally 5 weeks ago, we were, there were people questioning Millsy. It's like, oh, well, is the defense, is it up to scratch? I mean, that loss was literally that 5-4 shootout with MacArthur. What we were just talking about, it's sort of flying in the face of what I was trying to say. You got to win those shootout sort of games, and we'd be talking 5 on the trot for the Jets, and they'd be top of the table right now. So, but third place, they're sneakily good. Sort of gone under the radar a little bit for everyone, and Millsy's got them humming in the Hunter.
Yeah, and it really reminds me a lot of, and it shouldn't come as a surprise, but some of the Adelaide teams of the last couple of seasons, right? Obviously a very young squad with a lot of raw talent, but that are able to just kind of get these results, whether, it's this 2-1 where it's a bit of a heart attack for the final 10 minutes after conceding, which has all the DNA of a Carl Viet kind of coached game. And of course, Mark Milligan kind of got his come up through that system at Adelaide United. So now able to take some of those learnings and end up not dropping points when it looked like that was a real possibility at the end of the game there. That's huge progression for him and for the Jet side as well. I think, you look at round 1 with that Mariners game where they did, lose in just crazy circumstances from one end of the pitch to the other. They concede the losing goal, and it feels like they've come a long way from that in just 12 games. It's been really impressive to see them. And on that idea of a shootout, the Jets, okay, their defense might be able to might concede 3 or 4 goals here and there, but it does feel like their attacking talent, knockwood that Eli Adams is okay. I haven't seen anything about him, so I'm presuming that means it's nothing major, but we'll wait and see about that. But with the likes of him in the squad, Alex Badalatu, when he comes back from injury, is going to be a huge in for them as well. It's just it's going to keep clicking for them, and they can really compete. Third in the table, that's huge for them. And then finally, of course, on Sunday it was a rescheduled game. There's been some torrential rain in parts of New South Wales. We saw kind of a little bit of it in that Wanderers Jets game, and it kind of played a little bit of havoc on the pitch there, but it was worse in Gosford, Poletti on the Saturday. The pitch under about 8 feet of water by the looks of it from some of the photos I've seen. It was absolutely awful there. No surprises that the game was suspended, but to reschedule it to just a day later with more rain incoming over the 12 or so hours between the announcements, that's it seemed like a risk. And there were certainly moments in this game where it looked like the pitch was a little bit waterlogged. The ball was kind of just stopping at times when it was coming down from a bit of height. It kind of wouldn't bounce as much, and there's a big splash of water, and for all that, of course, a game played out 1-1 between these two sides. I think, given how it played out, kind of a pretty accurate result for how both teams performed. I don't think either of them will feel like they necessarily deserved more. But, the key points there, these conditions, it's a rough one. We're normally talking this time of year about heat problems, right? And, too many drinks breaks, or why are they playing in these kinds of conditions? But it's the opposite here. It's the problem you'd have in winter in most places of torrential downpour and the pitch is waterlogged. And I don't know, I feel like the pitch definitely played a part in this result, being 1-1 and neither team really able to capitalise on a lot of chances. But then the alternative is, when do you play this game, right? You can't really schedule it midweek. The only option for mine in terms of rescheduling wouldn't have even been a rescheduling. It would have been a straight fixture swap. But then so literally it would have been, right, is Campbelltown Stadium available? Like you make that call 11 a.m. Sunday. It is, sweet. We'll play Campbelltown Stadium. We'll play that on Sunday. Mariners are due to travel to MacArthur in a few weeks' time in a midweek fixture. Literally just swap and switch around. The problem you have with that sort of solution is you've then got to find staff at Campbelltown. You've got to, do you let fans in? And at the last minute as well,
exactly,
on a Saturday afternoon.
Exactly. Yeah. What sort of crowd are you expecting? Do you just decide to go closed doors but then that hurts the league. That hurts both clubs. So I've got no issue with the 24-hour delay, given it would have happened anyway. Because MacArthur have got Champions League commitments, Champions League 2 commitments, I should say, as opposed to Champions League Elite commitments.
Yeah.
So it's just really a situation of there's nowhere else to put the fixture. It is what it is. The good drainage system up there at Gosford, the sort of drainage system you would expect a $750 million stadium to have without having to be redone. it is what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, overall, I thought this was fine. It's a game. It happened. I don't think there's actually too much to take away from this. I've got no issues with it. I think probably the best thing to take away from it was probably Mitch Duke's back heel assist, and straight off the bench, and immediately making an impact.
Yeah. Like, it's his debut for MacArthur, obviously, but I don't think Harry Sawyer will feel too disheartened by it, because I was saying in the last episode that it's going to be a big weekend for Harry Sawyer, obviously with Mitch Duke coming in, and where does that place him in the pecking order and things like that. But I think Mitch Duke coming in, and yes, okay, it was kind of a nice little assist with the back heel, but I feel like he didn't have too much impact on the game outside of that. So I think Harry Sawyer might be breathing a little bit of a sigh of relief that he's maybe still got himself some time to continue as kind of the number one choice for Miej Stejovski at the moment. But all it takes is one game, and we've seen them from Mitch Duke in the past, especially with the Wanderers, his time at the Wanderers, where he gets a couple, and that's goodbye for whoever his competition at striker is. So Harry Sawyer will live to breathe another week.
That being said, they've got so many fixtures coming up towards the back end of the season, particularly if they advance to the quarters and the semis. Like, it's literally going to be, it might just be a case of, okay, we're keeping you for midweek games, and so whether that be league or ACL2, and Duke's going to start on weekends and come off 70th minute, and Sawyer comes on for 20 minutes here, and Sawyer plays 70 minutes midweek, and Duke comes off the bench for 20 minutes. Duke's getting up there. He's early to mid 30s, I want to say off the top of my head. They're probably close to mid 30s.
Oh, you're testing
from
me
memory.
now.
So it's literally, it's just we can't keep running forever, and there's probably just going to be a lot of rest and rotation, and maybe it's Duke that takes the midweek games, and Sawyer's the one who gets to start on weekends. Plenty of things for Stejovski to work out, and to be honest, it's a problem you'd rather have than be like, oh, I've got to play Harry Sawyer 70 minutes every single time we play. Like, we're going to run this kid into the ground because we've got no one else. You'd rather have options than not have options. And Stejovski is such a wonderful person that, to be honest, the players just seem to want to play for him. I'd have no qualms in saying that he's going to have no issues, sort of making sure everyone's happy in that locker room.
Yeah. Well, that's our wrap from this week of the A-League, and I want to give a quick thank you to Arrow Sport, who have been a big supporter of ours for a while now, and we can kind of talk a lot to the quality of their service and our experience with them. Obviously, they helped us design and create our awesome Round Ball Australia jerseys, which neither of us are wearing today, which is a little bit funny, but no, the whole process from that, from start to finish, was just immaculate with Arrow Sport. And obviously now local leagues are going to be starting up their pre-seasons. Some of you may already be into it, but if your team, your five-a-side, whatever, are looking for jerseys and kits, there's no one better than Arrow Sport. Obviously an Australian-based company. They make some great designs from kind of so just some cool patterns to completely bespoke like our kits were. Everything about them is top-notch quality, and if you use the code ROUNDBALL at checkout, you will get free shipping on any of your orders through Arrow Sports. So yeah, if you're looking for a kit, your mates are looking for a kit, your team are, whatever it is, head to Arrow Sport. They're absolutely amazing people and have been, like I said, a long time supporter of the Round Ball Australia podcast. So we thank them a lot. We will now head on. Poletti, the Olyroos have bowed out of the Under-23 Asian Cup in heartbreaking circumstances against Korea. A 2-1 loss, what was it, 80-something minute winner for Korea from a corner, when it felt like, for all money, the Olyroos were going to get the job done. They were threatening, they were creating chances, but it just wasn't to be. And I think overall, actually a bit of a disappointing run for them. Of course, the group stages, they finished top of Group D, but some of those results
it was left really late from the literally, it was a 7-minute period that saw them go from out of the group to top. So it's been a really shaky tournament from them, and they bow out in shaky circumstances. I think, it's a reasonable way for them to go out, but disappointing in the whole, because this is a group of players that I think a lot of people in Australia have a lot of faith in. Of course, we've seen them a lot in the A-League. We know their talent, and their kind of just inability to get the job done is a little bit disappointing. It is. Look, I'm trying to think of a way to spin this that doesn't necessarily end with Tony Vidmar out of a job, because look, I'm not going to profess to be the biggest expert on the under 23 age group or the under 20 age group. Where's Matt Olsen when you need him?
Yeah, we'll call him in for a bit.
But look, I watched most of the games of this tournament. I watched the mini match of the quarterfinal loss to South Korea. I'm not going to pretend like I was getting up at 2:30 in the morning to watch it or whatever time it was. Look, the only saving grace I can kind of come up with is the fact that there wasn't the first choice 23 that Vidmar would have wanted, that there were A-League clubs that blocked call-ups. The players, dealing with injuries, I think, as well. I mean, Kane Vidmar wasn't even supposed to get a call-up, and it was only through blockages that he ended up getting the call.
Yeah.
So you can't even really play the nepotism card there. It was sort of like
I've got to have someone. Yeah.
You got to have someone, and this is a player I know that I know exactly what they're going to give me, even if they weren't in the first choice 23. So it kind of is what it is. It's a non Olympic qualifying tournament that'll come in 2028. So it's sort of one of those. Yeah, you play the games. Look, there were some good performances. There were some bad performances. There were some heroic performances. That game against Iraq. Look, I don't know. This has sort of been a program that hasn't lived up to the expectations that we have of it, given that we know the talent that's in this country. And I said, maybe you can point to the saving grace of this, the fact that there wasn't really the first choice 23, all of the first choice 23 that you would have had, and maybe things would have played out differently. But you look at the way the under 20s are playing, and they're playing so much differently to this 23 side, and they're just playing free flowing, attacking, expansive football. And then you compare that with the 23s under Vidmar, and it looks rigid, it looks set structure. There's no room for creativity, there's no room for flair outside of a few moments here or there, which we saw in the opening game. But the Olyroos had a player advantage there. We saw in the last 10 minutes of that Iraq game where it was just kind of like we need to throw balls to the wall, see whatever sticks, and get away with it. So maybe it is time for a change. And I'm not gonna profess as to who would be best suited to take over the 23s age group that knows youth development, international football incredibly well. On the men's side of the game, if this was the women's side of the game, I could give you 10 names right now as to who I think would be better off taking charge of an under 23s or an under 20s program. But on the men's side of the game, maybe the option just needs to be explored by Football Australia as to, okay, do we want to risk another Olympic cycle where we don't qualify, where we don't have good performances, or we get embarrassed at major tournaments again?
Yeah, and this idea of players not being let go by their clubs, of course, is going to hurt. But I don't know how much of a saving grace it will be for Vidmar, because, as you pointed out, the football at times was really stale, and I think that's the telling thing is if you can play good football regardless of who's on the pitch, you're doing a good job, especially in these younger age groups. And we just weren't seeing that. And it wasn't like all of the first choice players weren't there. There were a number of players out there who really you're expecting to have delivered a lot more than they did, and we just didn't see that, partially because of the kind of system of football that they were trying to play. And it didn't get results, which is normally the one thing that you can go, well, at least it's getting results. It might not be pretty, but it's getting results. You brought up players weren't let go by their clubs, so that hurts. But I do think that overall it's been a growing trend with these Tony Vidmar coach teams of just kind of passive football, and it's hurting now. And like you said, is this a risk Football Australia wants to take moving forwards into the next Olympic cycle? Who knows? But I'm sure that discourse will continue for a while, as we wait to hear what Football Australia are going to do. Final couple of games of football to talk about, Poletti. The OFC Pro League it launched. It's out there in the ether now. Games have been played, teams have been fielded, and results have been had. And for the two kind of teams that I suppose this podcast has taken a big interest in, being Auckland and South Melbourne, both getting results in this first round of fixtures. Auckland beating South Island United 3-0 and South Melbourne getting the job done 2-1 against Tahiti. It wasn't easy going for South Melbourne, though. They went down 1-0. They're going to half-time 1-0 down as well, I think. So they really had to claw back to get that result. But I think overall, a bit like the Championship, we've seen some great football. We've seen some good results. And for these two teams that I suppose the podcast has a vested interest in, getting results is a good start to things for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we saw Roy Krishna turn out for Buller FC. I think that was that was a very special moment to see. Auckland making easy work of South Island United.
It's not surprising.
I mean, look, that one is what it is. I think. Yeah. I mean, Tahiti United. You dared to dream for a moment. And I can imagine.
Thought they might have had it. I thought they might have had it going in at half-time 1-0.
I mean, it was an absolutely wicked free kick.
Yeah.
To give them the lead, but South Melbourne were able to show that grit to come back and win. Although I'd imagine there was a lot of soccer Twitter getting ready to just I mean, to be fair, maybe, I don't even think half of soccer Twitter knew this game was on.
That's true. Yeah.
So. Maybe they weren't getting ready, but if they were paying attention, I imagine they're getting ready to, get the tweets going. I mean, Solomon Kings as well. They did a good job. Their win. I mean, a good first round of the circuit, which is what it is. Maybe it was a little bit ambitious from what I saw for them to book Eden Park. I mean, it was. Go Media Stadium not available? Could they not have found, somewhere else in Auckland to play it? I don't know. I think it was probably a little bit ambitious by the OFC to go for the big kettle of fish straight off the bat. But I mean, you also want to make a mark, and now the circuit moves to North Harbour Stadium, where they've got 8 games coming up in the by this time next week. They'll have gone through 8 games of OFC Pro League football, and I tell you, there better be no weather around that stadium. Otherwise, it's going to look like like we joke all the time about the monster trucks, ripping apart stadiums and everything like that here in Australia, and concerts and everything ripping it up. 8 games of football might just do it if there's any sort of adverse weather there for the next stop in the circuit.
Yeah. I think the whole thing with Eden Park, though, is just for them, being a little bit ambitious, but going, this is what we want to achieve, right? Is a full Eden Park in a few years' time, and once we've kind of established this, so they're kind of just setting the groundwork there, I think, and the more football that obviously is being played in this region, we've spoken about this in the build up to it, is just it's going to be so beneficial, and I know for sure that Matt has been really enjoying it so far. I'm sure we'll get him on the podcast again talking about it as the competition continues. Now we're going to finish off, Poletti, just quickly touching on a few transfers. There's been 3 big ones headlining the news over the last couple of days with regards to A-League clubs. One of them, Nick D'Agostino to the Raw. This has been rumoured for a little while now. We spoke, I think, in the last episode as well. We were supposed to have Kev Sangster on, and he was having internet issues, so he couldn't give the news firsthand. But definite reports that the Raw were interested in bringing him in, and that's now confirmed. Hiroshi Ibusuki joins the Wanderers, which is a big coup for them, getting a proven A-League goal scorer in. Maybe lost a touch, last season. He didn't quite look himself at Western last season, but, for the Wanderers, that's going to be a huge grab to have somebody who can reliably just kind of put the ball away in those chances. Just he always finds himself in the right spots and can put the ball in the back of the net. And then an interesting one that's kind of come out of nowhere is Sander Khartoum has joined the Wellington Phoenix. on loan for the rest of the season from Hearts in Scotland. I don't think he's actually played for Hearts this season, and maybe a couple of appearances in the Cup here and there, but he's had a long career in Europe, the Norwegian attacking midfielder, and he might provide Poletti a little bit of a spark in the middle third for Wellington, which has maybe not been there the entirety of this season, and they've been looking for. This could be a big signing for them, and if they can continue to perform the way they have done over the last few weeks, adding in an experienced attacking midfielder is a huge step forward.
Yeah, absolutely, it is. And Chiefy was, talking in the pre-match press conference that he actually had Cammy Devlin to help thank for this move. Cammy Devlin was sort of playing agent and talking up Wellington Phoenix and all that sort of thing. Chiefy said that he rang him to sort of get a bit of a character reference. What's this player like? And Cammy took that and just basically ran with it and was just kind of like, you need to go to Wellington, you need to go to New Zealand. You need to.
I love those stories. I love it. Like we've had a few over the years, right? I mean, there was the one of the more recent ones was Juan Muniz for Adelaide United was convinced to join the A-League by Juan Mata, who was talking up the A-League and Adelaide in particular, and the Highmarsh Stadium and the atmosphere there, and we've had this one with Cammy Devlin and Sander Khartoum, Bart Vriens and Craig Goodwin as well was another one. Like I always love these kind of stories where the draw to Australia isn't massive, and you still people don't even realise, I think, the quality of the league here, and it kind of comes down to the players playing agent a little bit, which is always good fun to see. But it's great as well though that these players that have moved on haven't forgotten either, and they're still able to kind of respect that. And the A-League is a very high quality level of football, and for a lot of players that can be a big move for their careers. So it's kind of a nice little story, but I think it's great as well to see that the players that have continued on with their careers still hold it quite dear to their hearts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you kind of see that as well with Ibusuki to the Wanderers. Had time at Adelaide, then went to Western United. Obviously, the situation with Western United fell apart. Otherwise, Ibusuki probably would have just been there this entire season anyway. Goes to India. That has its own set of turmoil. That's an entire podcast episode in and of itself. And so you end up in a situation where, January transfer window opens and Ibusuki's making the move back to the A-League, a 1.5 year deal as well. So he's there till the end of next season. Might outlast the current coach, who knows? But That is what it is. We've spent enough time over the last 2 months talking about Alan Stajic. D'Agostino to the Roar as well. Another one of these pre-World Cup loan moves where it's kind of like player wants game time to try to put themselves in Tony Popovic's plans. And, Daggers has done well, throughout the A-League. I thought probably the best part of this signing announcement was almost immediately after they've beaten Perth Glory on Friday night, the Brisbane Roar Twitter account goes, "There's only room for one lion in this league. See you all at 8 a.m. tomorrow." I think I'm paraphrasing that slightly, but that was basically the gist of the tweet. And then Nick D'Agostino gets announced at 8 a.m. Queensland time on Saturday morning. Like just good work all around. Like top bands, well done.
And finally, as well, we'll touch on Valère Germain, of course, the former MacArthur captain, long-time MacArthur player, arguably, I think, one of their best ever, and a very strong player in terms of the league as well. One of those players that you want every team's imports to end up playing like. I think he had something like 27 goals in about 50-odd matches.
It's 28 goals across all competitions, club's all-time leading goal scorer. And I tell you, firsthand, there was a relief for some people at the club when he actually went top of the goal scorer list. I'll let you work out why if you don't know the story.
Yes.
So yeah, it was it was good quality. Obviously, his time in the A-League didn't end quite as well as he would have liked. Sort of trashing the referees in the league on the way out. There were reports probably about a month ago from Robbie Thompson that, he was looking at coming back to the A-League. Japan's having this, 100-year transition tournament as they, move the calendar from, a yearly calendar to the European calendar. So, I wasn't able to, necessarily confirm, but I'm sure if Robbie's saying it, then, he's got absolutely no reason to lie.
Exactly.
And if there's anyone who's going to know what Valère is thinking, it's probably Robbie Thompson, given the French connection. So, I just, look, it would have been nice to have seen him back, having a quality player in this league. Why any move, if there was a move, didn't work out, for at least the rest of the season. It is what it is. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think this game was a shock when I was on socials on Saturday morning and I saw an interview he did on French TV where it's just kind of like, I'm retiring. He's my very limited French skills. Basically went, he decided it in the last couple of weeks and sort of was still making his mind up as he booked the appearance on the TV show, as to, whether he was actually going to go through with it or not. So, it was one of those things where, he's had a great career. He's been around the world. He's won titles in 3 different countries. So, best of luck to him in the future. Every interaction I had with him at MacArthur was a positive one. Seemed like a genuinely nice bloke. Off the field, on the field, definitely a competitor.
I think that's a nice way of putting it.
and look, it is what it is. At the end of the day, we want these sorts of talents to come to the A-League, and we want them to leave for the right reasons. If they do leave, and as I said, Jermaine didn't necessarily leave on the best of terms. Or with the best of thoughts of a lot of people, but it is what it is. He was out of contract. Club was apparently able to get a transfer fee for him on the way out as well. So for a player that maybe was not going to be re-signed by the club as well, depending on who you ask, like those sorts of things happen. Great career, Valère, man. Absolute pleasure to have you in the A-League, man. While you were here, best wishes in retirement.
Yeah, I think that is a very nice way to end this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. Bit of a longer one, but some cracking football, some great stuff to talk about. And when it's just the two of us, it tends to run on a little bit. We don't have somebody here controlling us at all times. But no, it's been a pleasure as always to have you on, Poletti. It's great to chat football.
100% it is, and don't worry, the football's not done. Dubcast every Wednesday morning. We've got a lot to chat about this week. Of course, we've got a lot to chat about this week from the wild A-League Women's weekend of football. So it'll be myself and Burke, as it is every single week, Wednesday morning, wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, there you go. Stick around for that, and stick around for later in the week. I think it's normally Friday we release them, isn't it? For our, it'll be a Friday episode of the main Round Ball Australia podcast. So we hope to have you all back for that, and look forward to seeing what news breaks, if there's any big transfers or anything like that over the coming days, which hopefully there will be. There's already been a few to set the standard, but it should be fun regardless. But yeah, we'll see you then. Goodbye.